Ronald D. Moore was at a panel during San Diego Comic-Con, and this is an article by Deadline. Battlestar Galactica would have to look different if it were produced today, says Ronald D. Moore. I thought this was a very intriguing topic of discussion. Yeah, I'd like to get y'all's thoughts on it. I think this was moderated by Mary McDonnell, this panel. So the question posed to the showrunner of the reimagined Battlestar Galactica was asked, what would Battlestar Galactica look like if it were launched today? And the article says that was the question posted to Ronald D. Moore, the Uber producer who returned to his native habitat on Thursday, San Diego Comic-Con, to discuss his life's work with former muse Mary McDonnell. And he said, quote, I mean, the story itself would probably be different because I wrote it at a specific moment in our lives and in our history. I was approached to do the project just months after the 9/11 attacks. As it was developed, it happened, and then there was Iraq and Guantanamo Bay, and we were dealing with the Patriot Act and a lot of issues of freedom versus security with terrorism in the modern world and fundamentalism. I wanted the show to talk about who we were at that moment. So if I were creating Battlestar Galactica from scratch today, I don't know. It's so hard to let go of what the show became. Initially, my thoughts on this particular comment here, what I do appreciate is while he says that he had a lot of these themes in mind because of the issues that were going on in the world, I didn't really feel that. Like, it wasn't really heavy in terms of it connecting with modern issues. So I appreciate the way he did it, that it was still very much incorporated into the story, that it wasn't out of place, because I feel like that's how you should do it. Like, even though he wrote it at this specific moment in time and of what was going on, he was inspired by, but still, it didn't date it. It didn't date the show. So that's the balance that needs to be struck. And I feel like a lot of maybe modern showrunners or Hollywood creators working today struggle with that. They don't know how to incorporate themes from what they see in the world today or whatever that is on the minds of people and audiences. They don't know how to incorporate it in a way that is organic to the story that's being told. And ultimately, the core story being told is in the wake of such a devastating tragedy with humanity, in the wake of facing their extinction. It's this ragtag group of civilians, military personnel, and such trying to survive against this AI threat, against the Cylons, and trying to find a new home. So that's the main story. And so many today don't have a specific story that you can incorporate other themes into, that you may be inspired by modern events, but ultimately your story needs to be what drives the plot. It shouldn't preach about modern issues, because that's not the story. It's not the story of 9/11, as he brings out, and issues of what humanity was willing to do in regards to ensuring its security and freedom, and if humanity deserved to survive. The premise was still the premise. It is still this battle of humans versus their robot creations. I feel like he did that very well. And if you did it where it wasn't subtle, then you would date your work. And I feel like even though he says that this was written in a particular point in time, it's still relevant today of those other themes that he was incorporating into that premise. His approach might have been different. What he's seen so far, his life experience may have changed the work in some regards, into some storylines perhaps, and characters' journeys, but ultimately it was subtle enough to also still hold up today. And that's what I feel like a lot of creators struggle with, is that they date their work. And these themes are still timeless that he wrote about then. These are still issues I think are in the minds of people, that people contend with as modern issues. The issues of freedom versus security and terrorism and fundamentalism. Are we not also experiencing those today too in the modern world? I agree. I think the story is as relevant today as when it launched, if not more. I mean, look at how the finale of the show ends. It's in our own modern day. It goes way forward in time to modern Earth, and look at all the things that we are seeing now. It looks just like that. Indulgence and just technology run amok, corporate greed it's extremely relevant. So it is interesting to hear him say that his approach might be different now. It might look different. When even still, if you have these themes that again I think are really timeless, that don't age. And that's the balance that needs to be struck there that I think he captured, is that even though you may be pulling from events that are happening, first of all, your core elements were still the same. And as far as like being Battlestar Galactica, so that's the core premise. And all these other things should be done in a way that doesn't date the show to where it is. It is still relevant today, which is, it was funny that we could still watch it and think that it was produced today. I don't mind a new spin. Old school Battlestar Galactica will always be my main jam. Just love the lightness of the way they approach such a heavy topic. The OG has a special place in the fans' hearts, and definitely very different, but Ronald D. Moore did strive to capture the spirit of the original, which I think is good. And I think a lighter approach would be maybe the way to go for the next any future installments. He continues, Ronald D. Moore, in his comments, he said, I would still try to approach it with the same attitude that I had when I approached the original, which was I wanted to preserve the framework of what the original was. I want it to be recognizable as Battlestar Galactica. It's still a warship and an aircraft carrier in space, guiding a ragtag civilian fleet running from the Cylons after an apocalyptic attack. It's about their society. What are the pieces of their civilization they chose to carry with them? What's important to them? What does it mean to be a democracy? Then I would have to get down to the weeds, and then it would be different because it would have to be informed by the last 20 years of what we have gone through. I think that's the balance too, that it's informed, that yeah, I get life experience or whatever, but again, I think there are just some themes that are just universal and timeless. But I think if you do it in a way that's not overt, that's still in keeping with your universe and your premise. And that's the thing. If you break immersion, if you take me out of Battlestar Galactica and take me into today, our modern life, my reality, that's not what I watched this show for. I watched this to escape into this other universe, or not to escape, but to be immersed into this interesting universe and these interesting story about humans and Cylons. But if you take me out of it, that's where you're going the wrong route. And again, it's a balance there. But yeah, you can be informed. Your life experience over the past 20 years can be informed in the themes that you develop inside this premise, with the fleeing the Cylons after an apocalyptic attack and the day-to-day issues of their society. That can inform that. If it's too overt, then that prevents immersion, or that actively takes the audience out, then yeah, you've strayed too far in that regard. He accomplished it very well back then. And I would hope that if he were to ever be involved in a new Battlestar Galactica show, that would still be the case. I think that's the last part he talked about that. He talked about his hubris and the confidence that he had handing over a script to Gene Roddenberry, or an assistant to Gene Roddenberry. And I guess that's how his career started. He thought nothing of handing over a spec script to a guide who was giving him and others a tour of the old Star Trek sets. That guide ended up being an assistant for Gene Roddenberry, who did in fact receive the script. And he says, it's hard to pin down why I felt that confidence. I just had this belief I was going to do it. Once he turned in that script, I fully believed it was going to sell. I was like just kind of waiting for the call, coming any day now. It's such a stupid thing to say, but it did work. But I didn't have any logical reason to believe it would, but it did. He did go on to work on Star Trek The Next Generation, Star Trek Deep Space Nine, and Outlander. Yeah, he's also currently doing the For All Mankind show on Apple TV+. And which is actually getting a spin-off now too, in the titled Star City, which will look at the story from the Russian perspective. It's very intriguing. So we'll see. They're still working on trying to do a new Battlestar Galactica show. So we'll see how they handle it, but I hope that they keep to Ronald D. Moore's approach at least, and trying to be faithful to the original and the spirit of that. But also don't date your work. If you want to pull from today's themes or whatever stuff that's going on, it should still be universal themes, timeless themes. That way your show will still be relevant in the pop culture sphere for decades on.